The chandelier above the Grand Meridian Ballroom cost more than most people's cars. I know because I sourced it. I had arranged every detail of that evening, the floral installations, the $340 per plate dinner, the silent auction paddles engraved with the foundation's logo, the lighting design that made the stage look like the center of something important. I had spent 11 weeks coordinating with vendors, managing the guest list of 400 donors, and personally calling 17 of our top contributors to confirm their attendance. The Whitmore Family Foundation Annual Gala. Our largest fundraising event of the year. A $3 million evening, by the time the final paddles came down. My husband, Daniel Whitmore, took the stage at 8:47 p.m. to deliver the keynote address. He was wearing the navy suit I had selected. Standing at the podium I had approved. Speaking into the microphone I had tested that afternoon at 3 p.m. to confirm the acoustics worked for his particular register. He spoke for 14 minutes about vision, about impact, about the kind of legacy that outlasts a single life. He was compelling. He has always been compelling. It is the thing I loved first about him and the thing that, in the end, made him most dangerous. And then, at the 13-minute mark, something shifted. He paused. He looked out at the room with the particular smile of a man who has decided, in real time, to change the script. I want to take a moment, he said, to address something that's been circulating in certain circles. Some people have suggested that the foundation's success is a collaborative effort. That decisions here are made by a partnership. He let the word sit. I want to be direct with our donors tonight. The Whitmore Foundation is my vision. My architecture. My leadership. The people around me, including my wife, Eleanor, have provided support. Administrative support. Which I'm grateful for. He looked at me in the front row. 400 people looked at me. But I want to be clear, Eleanor is not a co-founder. She is not an executive director. She is not a partner in any legal or operational sense. He smiled, the easy, practiced smile of a man who has never once worried about a room turning against him. She's my wife. And I think it's important, for the integrity of this organization, that everyone understand the distinction. The room made a sound. Not quite a gasp. The sound a room makes when something has happened that no one is quite sure how to respond to. Glasses held midair. Forks lowered. I sat in the front row with my hands in my lap and my expression composed and my heart beating at a rate that I was deliberately, consciously, methodically controlling. Because what Daniel did not know, what he had been too confident to investigate, too certain of his own narrative to imagine necessary, was that 7 hours earlier, I had made a phone call. And the people on the other end of that call were, at that precise moment, in the building. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I am 41 years old. I hold a master's degree in nonprofit administration from Georgetown and a CPA certification I completed while simultaneously managing the foundation's first capital campaign in 2019. I did not marry into the Whitmore Foundation. I built it. Daniel had the name, his family's name, his father's reputation in the Chicago philanthropic community, the inherited social capital that opens rooms before you've said a word. What he did not have, when he came to me in 2016 with the idea of establishing a family foundation, was operational knowledge. Fiduciary structure. Tax compliance. Grant management. Donor relations. The infrastructure that turns a wealthy man's good intentions into a functioning legal entity. I built the infrastructure. I filed the 501(c)(3) application. I wrote the bylaws. I established the financial controls, the grant review process, the audit procedures. I hired the first 3 staff members. I cultivated the donor relationships that grew our annual giving from $180,000 in year 1 to $3.1 million by year 6. My name appeared on exactly none of the press materials. This was a decision made early in our marriage, quietly, implicitly, the the way many decisions are made in certain kinds of marriages, where one person's comfort with visibility is assumed to represent both people's preference. Daniel was the public face. I was the architecture. We both understood this. We never discussed it directly, which I now recognize as the first error of many I made in trusting that understanding to hold. The second error was not noticing sooner when the financial reports began to look different. It was our accountant, an external auditor named Patricia Guerrero, whom I had retained in 2020 for our annual 990 filing, who flagged it first. A vendor payment that didn't correspond to any approved line item. $47,000 to a consulting firm called Meridian Strategic Group, LLC, that appeared in our expense records twice in the same fiscal quarter. I pulled the contracts. There were no contracts. I pulled the vendor file. Meridian Strategic Group had been registered in Delaware 4 months before the first payment. Its sole registered agent was a name I did not recognize. I sat with that information for 3 days. Then I hired a forensic accountant named Dr. James Okafor, paid him from my personal account, and told no one. Dr. Okafor spent 6 weeks reviewing 4 years of foundation records. What he found was not a single vendor anomaly. It was a system. A deliberate, layered structure for moving restricted charitable funds into privately controlled accounts, and it had been operating since 2020. In the 18 months before the gala, Daniel became a different version of himself. Or perhaps, I have thought about this often, he became a more complete version of a self that had always existed but had been partially obscured by the earlier years of the marriage, when he still needed what I provided. The gaslighting had a particular texture. It was never loud. Daniel is not a loud man. It operated through precision, through the careful, consistent reframing of reality in ways that made me doubt my own memory. You weren't in that donor meeting, Eleanor. You were in Chicago. I had not been in Chicago. The board has never included you in a fiduciary capacity. That's always been understood. It had not always been understood. I had the founding documents with my signature on them. You're becoming confused about your role. I think the stress is affecting you. I was not confused. I was building a file. By October of last year, 4 months before the gala, Dr. Okafor's analysis was complete. The total amount of diverted funds across 4 fiscal years, $1.84 million. Moved through 6 vendor payments to 3 shell companies, 2 of which were ultimately traceable to a holding entity in Daniel's personal name via a Nevada LLC structure. Charitable funds. Donor money. Restricted grants from foundations that had trusted us, that had trusted me, because I was the one who had written the applications and maintained the relationships, diverted into Daniel's personal financial architecture. I read the 94-page report in my home office on an October Tuesday, with a cup of tea that went cold, while Daniel was at a lunch meeting I had not been told about. I read it twice. Then I called an attorney. Not a divorce attorney. Not yet. A federal criminal defense attorney, to understand the exposure. Mine. Because my name was on those founding documents, and I needed to know exactly where I stood before I took a single step forward. The attorney's name was Catherine Marsh, of Marsh & Holloway in Chicago. She reviewed the documents over 2 weeks and provided a memo that contained the clearest sentence I had read in 18 months of confusion. Based on the documentation provided, you have no criminal exposure. You have whistleblower standing. I printed that memo. I put it in the folder. And then I made an appointment. She had $1.84 million in documented evidence, a forensic accountant's report, and a federal attorney's memo confirming her standing. She didn't go to the press. She didn't confront him at home. She chose the one night that was already on the calendar, the one he had already publicized, already invited 400 people to attend. Stay with me. In the 6 weeks leading up to the gala, Daniel was luminous. That is the only word for it. He moved through those weeks with the energy of a man who believes he has secured every variable. He was charming at the pre-event donor dinners. He was generous with staff. He brought me flowers twice, an unusual frequency that I noted without comment. He also, in those 6 weeks, did 3 things that I documented carefully. He removed my name from the gala program as a co-organizer, replacing it with foundation staff. He restructured the stage presentation so that the foundation's executive narrative was told entirely in first-person singular. And he had a meeting, which he told me was a board strategy session, that Catherine Marsh later confirmed, through her own channels, was with a personal financial advisor and had nothing to do with the foundation's board. He was moving money. He was preparing for something. I do not know if he was preparing to leave. To dissolve the foundation. To restructure in a way that would have further obscured the diversion. I know only that he was in motion, and that his motion had a direction, and that direction was away. What he did not know was that I had submitted the whistleblower complaint to the FBI's Public Corruption and Civil Rights Unit in Chicago on January 14, 41 days before the gala. The case agent assigned was Special Agent Renata Dominguez. I had spoken with Agent Dominguez 3 times by the evening of the gala. She was precise, methodical, and had reviewed Dr. Okafor's full report. She had also, I learned in our second call, identified 2 additional vendor relationships that Okafor had not yet flagged, bringing the total documented diversion to $2.2 million. On the morning of the gala, Agent Dominguez called me at 9 a.m. "We'll be there," she said. "Standard protocol. You don't need to do anything except be in the room." "I'll be in the front row," I said. "I know," she said. "We have the seating chart." Of course they did. I had sent it to them. 400 donors. A $3 million evening. The most visible night in the foundation's history. He chose that stage to erase me. He had no idea I had chosen it first, for a completely different reason. Daniel finished his speech at 9:01 p.m. The applause was substantial. He stepped back from the podium with the satisfied bearing of a man who has said exactly what he intended and landed exactly where he aimed. He descended the stage stairs. A board member clapped him on the shoulder. A major donor moved in to shake his hand. I did not move from my seat. I sat with my hands in my lap and I breathed at a steady rate and I looked at the chandelier I had sourced and I counted its individual crystal elements, which I had done once before during installation to verify the vendor's delivery count. 214. I had reached 97 when the side doors of the Grand Meridian Ballroom opened. Not the main entrance. The side doors, the ones that open from the service corridor, which I knew because I had walked every corridor of that ballroom during the event's setup and had noted, professionally, that they were the quietest access point for anyone who needed to enter without disruption. 4 people entered. 2 in suits. 2 in clearly federal-issue jackets, not the windbreaker stereotype of television, but the understated, identifiable bearing of law enforcement professionals who have done this before and do not need to announce themselves dramatically. Agent Dominguez was the woman in the gray suit. She walked directly to the foundation's event manager, a man named Todd, who had worked for us for 3 years, showed him a credential, and spoke 2 sentences. Todd went pale. He turned toward the room. The donor nearest the side door, a woman named Patricia Aldridge, who gave $50,000 annually and had known Daniel since 2015, looked at the agents and then looked at her husband and said, at a volume just sufficient for the nearest 8 tables to hear. "Wait, isn't that federal?" The question moved through the room the way a current moves through water. Not a wave. A shift. A change in the molecular structure of the air. Daniel was still shaking the major donor's hand when he registered the change in the room's attention. He followed the sight lines. He saw Agent Dominguez. And I watched his face. I want to be precise about this, I did not feel triumph. I did not feel the hot satisfaction of revenge that I had sometimes imagined in the previous 6 months of preparation. What I felt was something colder and more complete than that, the particular stillness that comes when a long project reaches its conclusion and the outcome confirms the analysis. He looked at the agents. Then he looked at me. I held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then I looked back at the chandelier. 214 crystals. He had spent 14 minutes telling 400 people that I was nothing. In the next 14 minutes, he would learn what I had been doing while he was certain of that. Don't go anywhere, because what happened in that ballroom lobby is the part that required everything I had built over 6 years to be exactly right. Agent Dominguez did not arrest Daniel in the ballroom. This is not how federal investigations conclude. They are not theatrical. They are deliberate. What happened that evening was the execution of a court-authorized appearance, a formal notification, delivered in the presence of the Foundation's legal counsel and board members, that Daniel Whitmore was the subject of an active federal investigation under 18 U.S.C. Section 666, theft or embezzlement from programs receiving federal funds, and 26 U.S.C. Section 7206, fraud in connection with tax documents, specifically the Foundation's Form 990 filings. The Whitmore Foundation had received $340,000 in federal pass-through grant funding over the previous 3 years. That made it federal. The notification was delivered in the Meridian's business lounge, removed from the ballroom, professionally, with the minimum disruption consistent with the legal obligation. Daniel's personal attorney was reached by phone and arrived within 22 minutes. I know because I was in the adjacent room with Catherine Marsh, who had flown in from Chicago that morning. The documentation Dr. Okafor had assembled was already in federal hands. 94 pages of forensic accounting. 6 vendor payment trails. 3 shell company registrations. The Nevada LLC structure. Bank records obtained via subpoena, records Daniel did not know had been subpoenaed because the subpoena had been served to institutions, not to him. There was also a piece of documentation that had not originated with Dr. Okafor. 3 months into the investigation, Agent Dominguez's team had identified a secondary account, a personal investment account held at a private wealth management firm in Wilmington, Delaware, that contained $680,000 in deposits that corresponded, within a 7-day window, to each of the 6 identified vendor payments. The account was in Daniel's name. His personal name. Not an LLC. Not a holding entity. His name. Catherine reviewed the federal disclosure with me at 11:15 p.m. in that business lounge while the gala concluded, quietly, surreally, in the room next door. The 990 fraud alone carries up to 3 years, she said. The 666 count, given the dollar amount and the pattern, is more significant. His attorney will attempt a cooperation arrangement. They usually do at this stage. What does cooperation mean for the Foundation? I asked. That depends on what you want the Foundation to become. I thought about the grant recipients. The 17 community organizations we had funded over 6 years. The early childhood literacy program in Englewood that had received $280,000 from us over 3 grant cycles. The Women's Workforce Reentry Initiative on the South Side. I want it to survive, I said. Catherine nodded. Then we start the restructuring tomorrow. Daniel was formally indicted on 4 counts in April, 8 weeks after the gala. His personal attorney negotiated a cooperation agreement that resulted in a plea to 2 counts, 1 violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 666 and 1 count of filing a false tax return. Sentencing was scheduled for the following autumn. The $2.2 million in diverted funds was subject to a civil recovery action filed by the Foundation's newly constituted board. Of that amount, $1.7 million was recoverable from the Wilmington investment account, which had been frozen as a condition of the cooperation agreement. The remaining $500,000 was the subject of an ongoing civil claim. I filed for divorce on the same day as the indictment. The divorce proceedings took 11 months. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, and Catherine had ensured, in the months preceding the gala, that my contribution to the Foundation, documented through founding records, board minutes, donor correspondence, financial filings, and the forensic accounting report, was legally established as the basis for a substantial marital asset claim. The settlement included my continued role as executive director of the reconstituted Whitmore Foundation, a renamed entity I chose to call the Meridian Community Foundation, not for the hotel, but because the word means midday. The highest point of light. The financial settlement was handled privately. I will not state the figure here. I will say that it was fair. For the first time in 6 years, it was fair. The foundation's board was reconstituted with 7 independent members, 3 of whom I recruited personally from the nonprofit governance community. We completed an independent audit within 60 days of the restructuring, clean, filed on schedule, published on our website in full. Our first grant cycle under the new structure funded 21 organizations. The Englewood Literacy Program received $310,000. I called the program director myself to deliver the news. She cried. I held it together until after we hung up. Then I sat in my office, the one with my name on the door now, the nameplate I had ordered the same week the board vote was certified, and I allowed myself, for approximately 4 minutes, to be something other than composed. 4 minutes. Then I opened the next file. People ask me what it was like. Not the legal process, they understand the legal process once I describe it. They ask about the interior experience. What it was like to sit in the front row of that ballroom and hear the man I had built something real with tell 400 people that I was nothing more than a supporting character in his story. I tell them the truth. It was the clearest I had felt in 2 years. Because when Daniel took that microphone and said what he said, when he looked at me with that practiced smile and reduced 11 years of documented, legal, operational contribution to the word wife as if it were a category of furniture, he did not diminish me. He confirmed my analysis. I had spent 2 years wondering if I was wrong. If I had misread the financial documents. If Dr. Okafor's report was somehow mistaken. If the man I had married was capable of what the numbers were describing. In 45 seconds on a stage he had no business standing on with such confidence, Daniel answered every remaining question. And I sat with my hands in my lap and I counted the crystals in a chandelier I had sourced, and I waited for the side doors to open. There is something I want to say to every woman who has ever built something and watched someone else hold the microphone. I am not speaking about marriage specifically. I am speaking about any structure, professional, personal, familial, in which your contribution has been absorbed without acknowledgement, your competence has been leveraged without credit, and the person who benefits most from your invisible work has convinced themselves, and occasionally you, that the invisibility was a natural condition rather than a choice. Your invisibility was a choice. Theirs. And the answer to that choice is not loudness. It is not performance. It is not the satisfaction of a public confrontation, though I will admit, in honesty, that watching Agent Dominguez walk through those side doors was one of the more geometrically perfect moments of my adult life. The answer is documentation. It is the quiet, consistent, unglamorous practice of recording what you have done, verifying what you are owed, building the file that transforms invisible contribution into legal fact. Daniel stood on that stage and told 400 donors that I owned nothing. What he did not know, what he had been too dismissive to imagine, too comfortable in his own authority to investigate, was that I had spent 18 months building an asset he couldn't see. The truth. Documented. Verified. Submitted. Federal. And when he finished his speech and descended those stage stairs and shook that donor's hand with the confidence of a man who believes he has just secured his position permanently, the doors opened. Because I had built something he couldn't take. He just forgot that I knew how. Final frame, black screen. White text. The Meridian Community Foundation completed its first year. 21 grants. 43,000 lives impacted. The nameplate on the executive director's door reads, Eleanor Whitmore Marsh. The chandelier is still there. 214 crystals. I counted them once to verify the delivery. And once more, on a Tuesday evening in February. To stay calm while the doors opened. They said you owned nothing. Build the file. Then let the doors open. If you have ever been the architect behind someone else's stage, if you have built something real and watched someone else hold the microphone, leave one word in the comments. Documented. That's all. And if this story belongs to someone in your life, someone who is still in the middle of it, still in the part before the file is complete, send it to them today. Because the doors open. They always open. You just have to be ready when they do.